Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome at this IFFR talk. For us, it's a special talk because it's a critics talk. And us is a lot of people spread out in the audience. But for one, it's my colleague Jan-Pieter Ecker, who together with me, my name is Dana Linsen, has been the curator of a program called Critics' Choice for the last 9 years. We even continued during the pandemic, and then we did online or kind of half full, half empty versions. And Critics' Choice is a context program where we speak and think about films together with you, the audience, sometimes by means of a video essay, sometimes there's an intervention. We had a beautiful screening here in Warm a few years ago where Tara Judah is also in the audience and Pete Walsh were shooting 60mm material, developing it and screening it here the next day to remind us actually that the idea of the kind of the fast film was already something that existed in the early days of cinema. Tonight we also have a very special event, which will be the introduction of the Woesha film Demigods at 9 in the Juriaanse Zaal of de Doelen, which will be introduced by, I think it was probably the first video essay made with AI-generated images and a performance. So we'll be kind of combining tech and performativity and liveness again. And this speaks to the theme of this year's Critics' Choice, which is play. Also this year, Critics' Choice has been working together with the Young Critics, a trainee program at IFFR that is celebrating its 25th maybe birthday this year. Actually, it's probably the oldest critics program, traineeship, young critics program in the world, and now it's something that exists in many other places. And the magazine or the newspaper that you're holding, The Return of the Daily Tiger, has been written by them. Their names are on the screen behind me. Not everybody is here. Some people had to go to other festivals. Someone, Kirilo, is arriving tonight, hopefully from Kiev, which is also very special to be meeting him in person. But there's 3 people that I really would like to introduce to you. And those are the critics that are going to moderate most of this talk, this show, where we have invited 3 filmmakers, Dutch filmmakers, Nafis Nia and Remy van Heugden. And you're Swiss, Valentin, or French? Okay, Swiss filmmaker Valentin Merz, who made a film that still has to premiere tomorrow, but that was a film that I saw in Locarno already, and then I was thinking, okay, maybe I can try to do my little pitch again or my little wrap up. I thought this is pornography meets the Blair Witch Project in a highly spiritual way. So I think that should make you curious to check that film out. Valentin is already here to speak with the other 2 film directors and our 3 critics about how critics and filmmakers need and read and communicate. So I'm going to invite to the stage Łukasz Mankowski from Poland. Alonso Aguiar from Costa Rica. And Madeleine Collier from the United States, or at least that's where you're pursuing your PhD, so please take a seat. It's also a little bit about you. It's not often that 4 critics are on stage because we're always behind our screens and introverted and shy. But we're proud that you're here. So it's also a nice opportunity to maybe talk a little bit about how you came in film criticism. And it's very different from my generation where you thought, okay, I'm going to be a film critic. I speak to the chief critic of a newspaper, do an apprenticeship, and then this is going to be my day job. Because nowadays, critics do many, many roles. Alonso, how's that for you? And how's the situation in Costa Rica anyway?
Well, my way of getting into criticism was actually already in relationship with the internet. I did some, well, to me now, cringy, Tumblr posts about films and music, and eventually I came across a Costa Rican blog that was created during like the heyday of Costa Rican independent music, and I started like writing more seriously, I guess, about like art, and that eventually led me to film, which has always been like one of my main passions, I guess. I started like, out with particularly like horror films, but eventually I started like seeing everything, and yeah, then yeah, like I went to a couple of like workshops before this one, and that helped me like meet people and get some assignments and write in other spaces. And at the same time, it's also been interesting since the Costa Rican film scene, in a way, well, it's not really a scene, but many filmmakers from Costa Rica are being like selected to festivals, so it's been interesting to have like that kind of like shared growth, I guess, in a way. So yeah, it's been pretty good so far, I guess. Difficult, but good.
And in terms of, I mean, we should not speak about money because it's terrible, but is it something, is it a sustainable living, or are you doing side jobs or other?
Yeah, it's not sustainable at all. I mean, in Central America, there's literally like almost no like formal criticism, no critical organizations, barely any newspaper that pays for like art writing in general. So yeah, I do have like a day job I have to do like to pay the bills, but at least it lets me have like some time to do like freelance writing and freelance like programming and stuff like that. But yeah, in Central America, it's a pretty dire situation, also with like political instability and the socioeconomic like context. But I mean, I try.
Madeline, I already told the audience you're pursuing a PhD, but what is your journey into criticism, and how do you feel more journalistic writing and academic writing relate to each other?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm pursuing a PhD now. I'm in my second year in the States. Yeah, and I found in general I kind of have been keeping up both my criticism and my academic writing through college and now beyond into my graduate programs. And I find being able to do both kinds of writing at the same time really helps me stylistically, helps me communicate better, it helps me have different ideas to draw from, different pools of thinking and pools of thinkers to work with. So it's really important for me to be able to keep both of those balls in the air, so to speak. Yeah, and so opportunities like this where I get to meet people who are thinking about film in a different context than I am in my day-to-day classes is really a wonderful opportunity for me.
Lucas, you're also kind of doing many things, juggling many hats or keeping many things in the air. Tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's nice that there's a whole room here to hear the stories that we're about to tell. We hope not to bore you that much with our stories. But yeah, my journey happened, I think also because of Rotterdam, just attending as a regular press. But before that, I also attended many young critics programs, and I was just basically obsessed with Asian cinema. My background is programming, also doing PhD about Japanese cinema and film criticism. So I think it was firstly because I felt there's a lot of gaps to be filled. In Poland, nobody basically wrote anything about Asian cinema. Before Parasite, you couldn't see anything basically, even in regular distribution. And I hated the fact that when you have to write about something, it has to be in this distribution. Otherwise, you can only resort to your own, I don't know, blogs. And that started with me. I had a film blog. I still have on Facebook. That's an old school thing to do, but whenever I know that there's something that nobody will want to publish, I'll just write about it, and I really felt passionate about it. And it started to grow and grow. There were like some fundings, even some awards, and then I realized this is something I really like to do, even though I felt at first that I really want to be a filmmaker, and I even started to attend like courses in Łódź at film school, which is quite well established. But then I realized to be young and starting as a filmmaker is very difficult, and so maybe I'll just get a sense of background of criticism first and start to learn about the world in general. And then I felt this is somewhere I belong to. And then it translated to PhD program, to programming as well. But the general premise was that I really wanted to be some sort of I don't know, I don't want to sound cliche, but a guide to things that are underrepresented, and I found that like Asian cinema at some point was really underrepresented. It started to become a thing after a while, and now it's thriving. Although there's a lot of crisis behind every cinematography, basically, but that I found really a thing for me, especially talking with filmmakers. There's, I think, one of the most unique experiences for me was always just kind of like discovering this newcomer and giving a voice, and also paying attention to emotions, stories behind that, and making a story out of it, a narrative on its own. And that was something that just really get me going from the start, and it still does, luckily. Yeah.
So you know part of your audience because you program a film festival, so you see them. But how is it when you write and when you self-publish? I guess it's also a question that goes out to all three of you. Do you know who your readers are? Do you interact with them when you're publishing blogs and on social media?
I mean, with starting with the blog, yes, you know them, because at some point they start to approach you at film festivals, and they say they really appreciate your work. And I think it's one of the best feelings in the world, that you can actually say, oh, I had a influence in someone's sensitivity towards cinema. I think that's the biggest award that couldn't be measured with any sort of money. But in terms of the regular audience, when you publish things, I think it really depends from the outlet. And I think it's also whether you're conscious about what kind of outlet you want to work with and what kind of relationship you have with the outlet. And then I think it starts from there. And of course, it's also connect with social media and how you advertise your work, how you sell it, basically. But at the same time, how you interact. And of course, Twitter is a tool that has been a very useful tool for us critics and journalists. But also discussion panels, radio shows, podcasting as well, I think. And festivals in general. I think this is like a organic platform, so to say, that you can actually meet with your audience there, because after all, you're the bridge that connects also the filmmaker and the audience at times, especially during the festivals. I think to answer that, yeah.
How's that for you, Alonso?
Yeah, I definitely think that film festivals are like kind of the only, at least for me, like palpable way of like talking face to face with an audience, because like I do mostly like freelance stuff for international outlets. So at the same time, you're basically just like throwing your work into a void of like social media. Like you might get like interactions or like reactions, but they're really, I mean, they're nice to see, but you don't really get like the context. And then in a film festival, when like Lucas mentioned, like someone approaches you about something you've written or like something you publish, is pretty surreal to have like, and also makes it like rounded in a way to like be able to feel it, like, I don't like the word like influence, but like at least like share like a dialogue or share your perspective with someone else and have that kind of like conversation going on.
Yeah, just to build on that, it does often feel like sending your stuff into the void. But I think for me, particularly hearing either from the audience or sometimes from the filmmaker themselves, particularly when it's like a work that I'm choosing to highlight because I think it's not going to get the attention that it needs, and maybe it's particularly political or it's engaging in ideas in a really compelling and unique way, but is not doing so in kind of a format or like a more mainstream way. It's really nice to hear that the filmmaker could then use that review to help reach a broader audience, and that kind of comes back to what Lucas was saying about being a guide and being some kind of like steward of a film and trying to help it find its way in the world is like a really special thing to be part of. Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a dangerous thing called gatekeeping, and also selecting very, very, I don't know, typical, very something that is just framed instantly as a kind of like a festival canon that could be easily sold. And I guess it's also a danger in that, where being this guide can also be being this gatekeeping person who just kind of just have a huge influence on trends, on currents, and how it can shape perspective, generational perspective on cinema, especially when I can think of like Asian cinema. There's a lot of things that you could say, like how much like authorship kind of raised basing on just several filmmakers that were endorsed by several critics, and they kind of brought it to Europe or to the West in general, and how it kind of became a precedent and a kind of like a reference point for many other filmmakers for the next, I don't know, 2-3 decades or something like that. So it's also interesting dynamics within that it can also, being careful with that and then just selecting something for the just general trend appeals, something like that.
That also means that you really have to be aware of that position. I think that's also a difference between our generations without making that too big of a divide. But the authority of the critic is completely different nowadays than it was before. And I think people know where they come from and to whom they're speaking. I guess that's a point of awareness. We're also invited you to work together on a video essay. I think that could make a beautiful bridge to our guests, because all of their films have been or will be introduced by a video essay in the program, but not all of them by you, because you collaborated on a video essay. How was it to work on this kind of, it's not a new form anymore, but this newish form, and then collaborative, which is also something that critics normally don't do. I think, Madeline, you were the first to send in your ideas on Remy's Mascot, and it was like Joost Broer-Huizinga, who was kind of helping with the editing. He thought, okay, we have a starting point now, but what was going on in your mind? Can you talk a little bit about this process?
Sure. Yeah. So the four of us, and I guess also Jason, a few of us young critics put together this video essay on Mascot. It was the first time I'd ever done a video essay. I've done some archival film work before, so I kind of had some technical skills to put something together, but it's very different when you're able to use as your evidence like actual samples of the film. And that was really interesting for me in terms of citation, like having a script and then having the things that back it up be like a gesture or like a little intangible moment in a film that would be very hard to describe in words. So I found that really interesting, and then Joost put together this really dynamic and engaging format that plays on correspondence, because we're all in different parts of the world, encountering a similar phenomenon and over various platforms. So it was really cool to see how that all ended up coming together.
And then, Alonso, you collaborated as well. Can you tell us what you contributed to the video essay?
Well, I came into we all talked about like the project for some weeks, but I think the last one to file something, and like getting like the general concept of what we're like trying to do did help me to approach the essay in a way, but also found it quite refreshing to actually don't know exactly like what everyone was doing, and actually it's for me it's refreshing also like to see the video essay. I know there's like different approaches to what a video essay is, and like the format itself, and how to, I don't know, like play with archival footage, with voiceover, with, well, not using voiceover, just like editing techniques themselves. So it was like quite an interesting exercise, and also an interesting way of thinking about like how, a conversation we had these couple of days, and I think we'll have today later on, about like video essays as filmmaking or not. Yeah, it was quite an interesting experience.
We're going to keep this question for the filmmakers, because I'm sure they will have a thought or two about that. Now these critics are also stealing our tools. What's going on? Lucas, you weren't involved in the video essay, but I'm sure at some point you will make one. Maybe this is a good point to watch the video essay that was made for Mascot, and then we can do a little rotating chairs here and ask the filmmakers on the stage. So the video essay, please.
Reflecting the rise of far-right and misogynistic white supremacist factions around the world, Mascot develops a psychological profile of radicalization in one Dutch family.
Violent extremism and radicalization are often linked to a sense of injustice and non-belonging. In Mascot, the core family is fractured by Jeremy's unresolved rage and growing distance from all social fronts.
Within the last decade, global cinema as a whole has begun to reckon with a long history of glorified toxic masculinity on the screen.
A la mujer más bella, si es solamente eso, bastará con contemplarla, con mirarla.
Entonces me voy acercando y después si no
Caballero es el que tiene a la mujer solitaria que le solicita en el camino.
Ganas tremendas de tener una pequeña cookie para hacer el amor.
Tomás, estoy harto. ¿Cuánto carajo hay en este pueblo le lleva ganas a Eulalia? Pero...
Después se le propone, claro, que no hay que dejar vivir mucho el tiempo porque la mujer es como el pan, hay que comérsela caliente porque si se enfría ni el diablo le mete el diente.
Mi programa de televisión.
Ya te dije que tu programa de televisión, lo que tú quieras.
Darlas a hacer una orgía con 6 animales, eso fue un chiste y a ella les molestó.
Similarities to Mascot can be found in two contemporary Filipino films. Like in Mascot, deformity is central to its raining frogs outside. Writer, editor, and director Maria Estela Paiso uses changes in form to make tangible the psychological corrosion and the internalized turmoil of the everyday Filipino, symptoms resulting from years of exposure to rampant corruption and violation. Paiso's nightmare imagery culminates in a picture of bodily decay that makes the protagonist unable to recognize themselves in front of the mirror, erasing their face and physical features and their identity. Similarly, 11103 is a documentary centered on such erasures. Directors Jeanette Ifurong and Mike Alcazaren focus on the survivors of the martial law era as they seek reparations for the injustices at the hands of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr.
I promise that cutting edge shall ever be clean, pure, sharp.
By juxtaposing the suffering experienced by a dying generation with the footage of the national elections in 2022, Ifurong and Alcazaren reveal the cyclical nature of history in the Philippines.
Hoy, gumising na kayo! Hindi lang ganito ang nangyayari sa panahon ng martial law. Gusto niyo bang maulit?
American cinema has famously minted a range of hypermasculine genre heroes and anti-heroes, from Scarface's jealous gangsters, to Rambo's rogue military veteran, to American Psycho's suave serial killer. Perhaps no character better exemplifies the American masculine ideal than the cowboy. He is a stoic loner, a family patriarch defined by conservative family values, an agent of the colonial state. The mythology of the cowboy implicated and implicates all Americans. The cowboy's particular variety of rugged and certain masculinity is a bedrock of white American society and counters anxieties triggered by otherness, change, and the unknown. The Western film has evolved over time, staging changing understandings of gender, settler colonial culpability, and relationships to the land. Since the 2016 presidential election, American cinema has seen a particularly dramatic shift in narratives about cowboys. The rise of revisionary westerns, which explore alternate trajectories of masculinity, reimagine the encounters which took place and continue to take place on the American frontier. In Kelly Reichardt's First Cow, the emotionally stilted buddy film is transformed into the story of the tender friendship between a would-be baker from Boston and a Chinese immigrant on the lam. Reichardt explicitly foregrounds both the importance of cooperation and the limitations of the famed American entrepreneurial spirit in the face of a systemically unequal distribution of resources. In Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog, which, though not an American production, takes American masculinity as its primary source material, the violence of settler colonial patriarchy is shown to take its toll on a range of victims and perpetrators. Exploring repressed homosexuality and various forms of male closeness, Campion does the psychological digging to understand and complicate the terse and cruel glamour of the cowboy. Finally, Chloe Zhao's The Rider centers a Lakota Sioux man in a story about close animal-human bonds and the damage done by injunctions to, in the words of the protagonist's father, man up and be a cowboy. Through the contributions of these recent films, we begin to understand that countering toxic masculinity in the American context means revisiting and revising its foundation myths and origin stories.
Cinema becomes the space to hold and articulate personal and national rage resulting from displacement in society. Films reflect and refract these human experiences of anger, frustration, and ostracization, becoming a vessel through which traumatic events may be manageably confronted, a place where injustice is not erased but displayed in its full-bodied and honest brutality.
I'm going to stay up, and then we're going to do some rotation, but I'd like to invite all our filmmakers to join me, and we'll chat a little bit about your relationship to criticism in your films. So. So first of all, thank you all for being here with us. It's really lovely to get the chance to meet you all in person, already met Remy, and talk about your films. I was wondering if you could each just briefly introduce yourself and also your film, and yeah. I don't know, Remy, do you want to start, and then we'll move down?
Hi, I'm Remy van Heugden. I'm the director of Mascot. It's showed here at the festival. It's a story about a teenager, present-day teenager who's always held very closely by his mother, and eventually starts taking one bad turn after the other, putting into a kind of a spiral of violence and patriarchism, I'd say. So, well.
You got sort of a taster with our video essay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Valentin.
So, hello everyone. My name is Valentin Merz, and I'm presenting the film De Noche los gatos son pardos, which is going to premiere here in Rotterdam tomorrow. And Dana already made a small introduction of the film. I don't know. I'd be pleased to share it with you tomorrow.
And Nafis.
Hello and welcome. My name is Nafis Nia. I'm the maker of That Afternoon. It's already shown twice. That Afternoon is actually about the life of two former refugees. They are exchanging their experiences as a refugee in the Netherlands and how people look at them and about their dreams and their life. So through a closed door, of course. So they don't have a really connection. Yeah.
Great, that's wonderful. So I just wanted to sort of start by asking you all how you think about films, what sources, what influences go into your thinking about film as sort of a broad category. Are there books that you've read, history or theory? Is there other podcasts? criticism specifically in certain journals? What sort of like enriches your thinking about films, or if you're going to make a film, what inspires that kind of thinking for you?
Yeah, I actually all of them. Yeah, I had enough time to prepare myself. So yeah, I read a lot of books, and also I learn also a lot by watching other films, and then you and by watching films, then you have your favorite filmmakers, and then from their films, and then I have always films favorite scenes, and I write them down, and I think, okay, I'm gonna use it in my own way, but also I read a lot of critics and film reviews, and because it's always interesting that film reviewers have a very different view on the films, because they are trained eyes, and they see, and then you can always see through them and discover more. Yeah. Yeah, and when I begin to write, then I stop actually watching and reading and listening. So I focus on my story. But before that, I do a lot, yeah.
And you're a poet as well, right?
Yes.
Does that have influence on your filmmaking practice, poetry that you read or that you write?
Enormously, yeah. Because and I sometimes I don't want to, but the result, everybody says, yeah, it's very poetic, and okay, of course, I love it, and yeah, and poetry is really part of my life, and from I think maybe the day I'm born, I grew up in a family with a lot of love for poetry, and so. Whether I want it or not, I just take it with me everywhere.
Valentin or Remy, do you have an answer?
So yeah, for me, before I started to make films, I was watching films, and I'm a big cinephile, and I think in a way this is also expressed in my film, like this love I have for cinema, and maybe I try to, yeah, also many times the question come like what are the influences, and I think this is something also which changes a lot, and that's where I couldn't say like, oh, it's this director, or it's this film, or I think it's like more something that lives through the film, like, or and through me, the other films I saw, the other filmmakers that inspire me, and just now I got back to these interviews from Truffaut and Hitchcock, which I read the book maybe 10 years ago, and now I'm listening to the podcasts because they're accessible as well, and it's like the original recordings, and I think it's very inspiring to. Because Truffaut had this double role, no, of like a critic and a filmmaker, which I don't have at all, no. Like I really like position myself on the filmmaker side, and I never wrote critical texts. But I think this approach also, which was analysis to nourish its own practice, is so rich, because it's not this. Both are conceptualizing, their work, but it feels like Hitchcock is conceptualizing his work also thanks to Truffaut and this intense interaction they have, and I think this is maybe also something that I feel is inspiring with criticism on my own work. It's in the best case when it's interesting criticism. It is an extension. It becomes an extension of the work, which also has its autonomy and can exist by itself. But it will also develop things on my work which I wouldn't pronounce this way. No, and I think that's. Yeah, I think that's where I think it's exchange,
yeah,
and that's where it's the most interesting.
I'll have to look up those conversations. They sound really fascinating. Yeah, and Amy.
I think one of the main reasons to start making actually stories or films were it all kind of came down, well, to a lot of anger, I think, and worry, and about the things that I saw around me, about society, the things I don't agree with, changes that I'm worried about, combined with fascination for human behavior and how all the flip sides of it, and that constant investigation, and it's just endless, and it just keeps me going. But I started. Well, I always thought I want to become a journalist, and then it just changed. Oh, I got a camera. Oh, I can film it, and then I can make documentaries, and then you can actually make fiction films about it, and the process is a bit more nicer, so you can even laugh about somebody being killed, and then. But no, but I mean, I found a way to bring those stories. So being from that investigative side, it's an ongoing thing. So if people start investigating my stories, that's where it's about being in contact and talk about it.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think you can really see that investigative journalistic impulse in Mascot very much. I guess I'll do one more question, and maybe I'll switch out for another critic. I guess you already sort of started talking about this, but just wondering what your relationship is with criticism of your own work. Do you read reviews? Do they ever influence what you go on to make next? Do you put them in a drawer and never look at them?
Yeah.
How do you relate to them?
I actually try to read as less as possible, I have to say, because it hits me. I'm sensitive for a lot of things, and it's interesting what you said. When I'm in the making, I never watch anything. I'm just kind of on a train, and then months after what I've made, I read them, and of course it's interesting because you get, I love the first reactions from the audience when you show a movie. Then people come and they get. Emotional or angry, and just the direct, because sometimes in a text I find it quite hard to read the tone, because it's most of the time it has to do with my own emotion at the time. So I can just it's like reading an SMS, to really read the tone. I think that's difficult for you guys.
What does the smiley face mean?
Yeah. But obviously it helps, and I think nobody is how do you say, not sensitive to criticism. So but I think it's part of the reason I make movies, and it's part of the deal, and it's an exchange of ideas, and You were saying, like, did it change? Or I'm mostly worried if other forces get a grip on the criticism, like you have to sell more papers, or when the market gets involved, and I think then you feel that I noticed it got pretty one-sided, because it's nice to see and analyze of the things you make, like the essay. I'm just amazed by all the things you reflect on, and I felt during the years it sometimes felt a bit one-sided in this country, at least.
Interesting. Valentin, what do you think about your criticism?
No, I actually do read, yes, the critics. People write about my film. And I really enjoy reading it, especially when it's surprising me. No, like I think from when I started with the film in Locarno, there were like many things written, and it was really like something that I was following and reading. And it was also my first feature film, so it's the first time I have this kind of exchange or reception and attention on a film. And for me, it was always like something I enjoyed discovering. I mean, especially when it was like bigger text that developed like ideas, and which also, because many of the critics that wrote about the film, they met me and made interviews, but then they also wrote independent things out of things which we didn't discuss together. And this is also something where I think it's that's the work, of the critic. It's like to it's not just an interview or like a reproduction of an interview text. It's really like developing an own work, a body of, and that I think it's also related to other films. I like to discover. And then I try to not be affected by the negative critics, because I think to understand my work as something independent from me. So I think that it's, of course, like I created together with other people, but and of course it's very close to my intimacy at certain points. But still, I think like once it's out there, it also has its own existence, and it's not me, So I think I don't want to say that this is like something you do, like identify yourself in this way. But that's what allows me to kind of keep this distance, to say, okay, that's what he thinks or she thinks, or. And what I was most maybe surprised sometimes, it's that you also feel like this thing of like you have your own work, you have your own authorial voice, like people also have their own vision on things, and this can be coherent from one work to the other. It's like in the critic's work, right? Like it can be like a line of idea that is followed through different films, and I think I also enjoyed discovering this.
Yeah, and I like what you bring up around sort of interviews and also critical work being in some capacity a collaboration between the filmmaker and the critic when it goes well and when you're on the same wavelength. It can be a really cool kind of collaboration in a way. But yeah, Nafis,
I always say, I'm not going to read them and I'm not going to listen to them, but eventually I do. I read them. And actually, I'm seldom affected by negative criticism, because I always think is also an idea. So it doesn't affect me much, I must admit. Of course, when it is a positive, I said, yes, they are right. But what I always afraid of is actually when people use me to put something else on the spotlight. For example, I'm originally from Iran, and I made a film about how people, especially in the Netherlands, looking at refugees. But of course, right now, Iran and Iranians are suffering more than ever by violence and the big amount of restriction. And then when people use me to actually emphasize on something else, and then I kind of freeze. I say, okay, I want to emphasize that because it is also very important to me, but it is not about my film. So I always hope that people get that, journalists, that, that to just say, okay, she's from Iran, but she made a film, and let's talk about that, because it is more important to me. And if there's, again, question about my past or my born country, I always, of course, want to answer that, but not all mixing together or whatever. So, yeah. And it is right now, it's happening also. Every interview I give and everything is, and the question is about, or me as an Iranian woman, which I totally understand, really, but also I want also attention on the life of refugees and their wish and dream to have acknowledgement when they are seeking for happiness in another country. I want also emphasize on that. So I don't know I answered your question well, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted to sign on this that I also prefer the positive critics. No?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if Alonso or Lukash, you want to switch with me?
Hi. Well, we actually just have like one round of answers because we will have to go to the audience as well. But since we're already talking about like criticism, criticism has also evolved, I think, beyond just like this traditional and like evaluation of the qualities of a film to works like, I guess, like video essays, which are also like dialogue with the film in basically playing with the same tools in different ways. I want you to ask you, like, how do you feel about that? Like, we're critics, we are not just like talking with your ideas, but also in the case of Remy, like literally like taking your images and recontextualizing them. Do you have any particular feelings with that?
Yes, I do. I think it's great. I mean, that's the whole point of making movies. So if you guys, other people, start reflecting on it and get inspired to put all these stories or ideas, put them in all shapes of context, I could never imagine. I mean, if you ask me personally, I was like, wow, you know, to see the cowboy, you know, I never thought about this. I really never did. And when I saw it like a few days ago first, I was like, wow, yeah, Jeremy's like, he's kind of a Dutch modern day cowboy. I mean, he's doing a lot of bad things and just being alone all the time, and you know, he's going through this landscape, and it doesn't actually matter where he is. He's just moving on, and just to have that idea, it puts it in so many other contexts. So please go ahead.
We'll do our best. Yeah. Valentin?
This one. I haven't seen the video essay yet. It's going to be presented on the 1st. But yeah, of course, like sometimes you see like your own images in the context of like a festival trailer, or no, then it's rather like it's like fun. It's nice to see it next to other images recontextualized, or I don't know. I haven't. Or in the TV, for example, when I really enjoyed this moment where it was on the TV station, and it was a very formal TV set, and the guy, the presentator, was like moderating the 8 o'clock news, and then at the end they brought up this film, and you saw like. Two guys kissing in the back, and it was like, and just a moment, like how it, this friction of the very formal TV set together with the images from my film, I really enjoyed it actually. Yeah, but I don't know, like it's in. I'm curious also to discover the video essay.
In your case?
Yeah, I think it's actually fascinating because when you are working on a film, you have certain ideas, of course, and a story. You're a storyteller through a film, and when the film goes out, actually, it doesn't belong to you anymore. And then it's fascinating, all these interpretations and all this, and suddenly your small movie, making with your whole heart, suddenly it gets a bigger and broader life. And I think that's when I saw the video essay about my film, my first thought and my first reaction was, what does this have to do with my film? And then I always, let it digest it and thought about it while I was talking to Jan Peter and also Joost, and realized oh, but I understand where that comes from. This is how the maker of the video essay actually made a connection to the film, and in a certain way he made it his own, and it's fantastic. So yeah, and yeah, I found it very fascinating.
But I think this idea of abundance is very important, because it's not possible, no, to once you give it out, also to control everything. It's not, and then I think it's also a healthy attitude to say, okay, now it's there. And of course, after the, I prefer that the best setting is to watch the film in the cinema from the beginning to the end. No?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the same time with video essays and film TikTok and everything, basically it's like an accelerated expansion on the idea of the author, if you want. Yeah. Now, Lucas will guide our resident Q&A expert will guide the conversation with the audience.
Thanks a lot, Alonso, for passing the mic by. And yeah, I'm no expert by all means, but I'm actually, I was thinking, because every talk is only completed when the audience also participates in it. So if you have any questions, dear audience, regarding our current conversation, especially related to film criticism and filmmaking as well, you can ask the question to the guests here present, basically on this side and this side. So are there any questions perhaps on the audience? I'm not sure if I don't see any hands because light is just very, very hot, but if there is none, then I can continue as well. I was actually thinking about one particular aspect because it's a bit follow-up to what's just been said, in a way that sometimes when the review is written, for instance, a critical one, not necessarily the one that you may like, for instance, but there is, I have a feeling that sometimes there is just a void left. I mean, there's an opinion given, and there is perhaps no reaction from a filmmaker, there is no dialogue established. And I was wondering whether you had like a chance to actually interact with critics, for instance, who gave a critical review of your film, and how did it happen, if yes?
Do you mean critical negative? Or?
Yeah, for instance, yeah. Especially.
It could be positive also.
I mean, the positive is, I think it happens that you just even say, thank you, hello, I'm very, grateful for that.
Friends.
Yeah, out of a sudden. But I'm wondering more about whether there was an interaction that you had after a critical perspective, a negative one, so to say.
Yeah, I have one long time ago. I made a documentary about how I learned Dutch language by voluntary people, old people in a church, and I wanted to have a tribute to their work, and there was a journalist. He wrote something in Amersfoort's Courant at that time, and I sent it, and he sent it to me because I don't get that newspaper in Amsterdam. So he sent it to me, and he was very, very negative, and he thought it's very sentimental and very, and he wrote, I don't think that the maker is really happy, and she is very respectful and loving towards these ladies, but I can't believe her. So I said, that's actually not a nice thing to say, I was very sincere. But so I called him and I said, let's have a coffee, and I want to talk to you. And he didn't want to. He said, I just wrote something, and this is my work, and I don't want to meet the maker. And I said, okay, but I just say that something. I was invited as a poet in Amersfoort to read some poetry, and he came, and I thought, I think I recognize him. So, and he didn't know, so I went to him and I said, hi, are you that person? And he said, yeah, how do you know me? And I said, yeah, we had a correspondence, and and I said, this is me, Nafis, and you wrote about my documentary. And he said, did I? No, I don't. I think you are making a mistake. I said, no, it's you. But don't worry about it. I just want to talk. And we had a talk, and we had wine together. And at the end, he said, now I listen to you, and I understand the film better. And I think it was sincere. But I'm from a very Calvinistic family. We don't give each other that much of compliment. That's what really, and I said, yeah, this girl is coming and tell us how beautiful Dutch language is, and I didn't believe you because I hated it. And I said, so and I thought, it has something to do with you, not with me.
Yeah, projecting ourselves into writing, it might be a very dangerous thing to do. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
But at the end, he believed me, but he didn't change. No, it was a long time ago.
But that points to a very interesting thing. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm not usually. You just follow the journalists and have coffee with them. So don't worry about it. I don't have time now. But at that time, I was very curious.
What about you guys? Did you had any interaction, perhaps, in your?
Not in the critical writing. Obviously, we have a lot of talks prior to festival and talk about the movie, and then it's a kind of a 1-2 talk, and you're both exploring, all kinds of things you that made the movie, and but I never had it after a review, good or bad. I never did it.
Did you have critical?
Also something in Dutch, maybe. I don't know.
well, maybe. Yeah. Well, it's good to hear from you guys. If you ever write something strong, a strong opinion about a movie, and then, would you do it? Would you do it before writing to kind of check if you're okay with your point of view, or does that touch the
now I'm on the spot. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I never had such a situation, but I asked this because I actually wanted to also ask something else about interviews and critical interviews, because I think that kind of situation can lead to a critical conversation, and then where you can actually discuss all this stuff. Because when you would meet with that critic, you would be entirely different from the start. I mean, this conversation, he denied that he had the right to do it. I think it's perfectly all right. I mean, it can look ridiculous, but at the same time, he has the right to do it. But at the same time, there is a chance to actually establish a critical interview. And for instance, we did EO piece, or the newspaper. I did the interview with Jerzy Skolimowski, and I'm Polish. He's also Polish, but I also wanted to have a critical discussion with him, because I'm not a fan of the film. I think it's one of my least favorite films that I've seen in the past 10 years. And I'm not a strongly opinionated person to start with. And I very seldom, criticize films openly, because I really appreciate the work. But at the same time, I felt the need that I want to discuss the film very critically with Jerzy Skolimowski. But at the same time, I use that word very often, he was kind of avoiding the critical perspective. And I was thinking about asking you whether you would be willing to actually have a critical interview where there's not a lot of praise to your work. It's more it can be very difficult position put you in the first place, because you have to kind of defend your opinion but also establish a dialogue. What would you think about that sort of formula? Because I think it's a little bit underrepresented in terms of interviews in general media, because you want more, more publicity that would just highlight the good stuff and have a, philosophical debate around, quality of image, methods, etc. But what about like a genuinely critical approach where you can actually, you know, accept the criticism, but also defend your work, but also just delve into some unknown realm of your work that you might not even be aware of? What would you think? Yeah, you can start.
I would be okay with that. I mean, it's never perfect, you know, and everyone sees a movie in a different way. So yeah, we were talking about the one-sided review, and then you cannot say anything, and yeah, you meet somebody, and then you discover it's a lot of projection, and in many times it is. And if you go open into it, I think it can be a great talk. And yeah, you don't have to defend your movie. I mean, you made what you made, and then together with its flaws and greatness and all. But I think, yeah, the outcome can only be good. I don't see any bad things in it, because otherwise you should not make any movies, probably. Because people will feel something on it.
Just out of curiosity,
yeah.
Since I'm probably the only person who's seen the Noche los Gatos Son Pardos, was it controversial in Switzerland? I mean, how did people respond to the film? And
that's why I was actually talking about the Tagesschau, the daily news, that was which I was really, because they asked me on the Locarno evening if they could do an interview, and I was like, the Tagesschau, they're not gonna understand my film. I was like, so it's gonna be in the 8 o'clock news, but then it was very positive, and this was the thing, something you like a journal you grow up with, and this was really a nice experience, actually. No, like to see this kind of that's what I meant with seeing these images in this context. No, and I was surprised because the Swiss press was very like in different, like also more mainstream, like or TV. It was very positively received. After there was also one critic which has a film blog and which is kind of influential for, like, I would say, a certain generation also of cinema goers, no? And he wrote at the same time, and it's the same institution, the Swiss television, that he wrote something like very, very critic about my film, and what I was actually I thought like it would have been more interesting to have a conversation with him, because I felt like what he was projecting on my film as a critic was very it was a very full of how do you say prejudice. Like there was a full of prejudice. I thought like, okay, of course, like my film is like not about a complete narration, or it's not that I'm offering you a very entertaining and thoughtful murder mystery story. And sorry.
That you do, actually, but you don't do the other thing. But people just have to join us.
Yeah, to watch the film, no. But that was an interesting thing. I felt like it was. It would have been interesting to say, okay, what is a critique on the film that would surprise me? And there, I think this goes in the sense of what you said. There I don't like the idea of defending myself. I think I would prefer the idea of a dialogue, but I think this could be interesting with someone who has like a critical position towards my film, to have a dialogue and to kind of like construct and to learn like new perspectives on my film, like things that I couldn't think of myself. No, that would be, I think that would be very rich. Okay. And also there could be as much negative as positive aspects.
Okay, yeah, that's really an interesting point. Are there many other questions maybe in the audience? Oh, we have hands, I think. Yeah, please go ahead over here. Yeah.
The mic is coming.
Yeah, please raise your hand again so that we can see where the mic can go. Yeah.
Thank you. I actually have two questions. And so the first question is about miscommunication. For example, like you said, when you make a film and it's not your own and it's something else, and then it could be also cause because different audience might having different understanding, interpretation of a film, and the power when you publish the film, your power of the film is also gone. So I'm very curious how are you gonna take the responsibility of a filmmaker and when you made something? And yeah, this is the first question.
Anybody wants to start with it? Nafish, maybe.
I would love to repeat if it is possible.
Could you repeat just quickly the question?
Yes. What is your how do you understand your responsibility as a filmmaker? Yeah, when the film is very easy to be miscommunicated in a way because when different people have different interpretation of a film. Yeah.
Actually, I don't mind that my film being interpreted by many films. I see that as a compliment. I think it okay. I offer them a more layered film that everybody has and sees their own story in it. It would be nice, and I think. At the same time, I am always ready to talk about my film, but not explaining it, because if I explain it, it means I didn't do a good job, and also not defending because it is an opinion, and you can listen. I always listen to people, and I never say I agree with you or I disagree or well. So I think it is an opinion, and I value that and I respect that. But sometimes it's a matter of taste. Sometimes people say why did you choose roses? I hate roses. But I say, okay, yeah, okay. I'm not. But, it can be also sometimes silly, but... and I think, I am responsible to... we are making films. So by any films, we are making a new reality, actually. Because otherwise... And that's why... of course, as a filmmaker, and I'm an engaged filmmaker, I don't want to put people on to just go and do violent things or kill somebody or that kind of things, very extravagant. But at the same time, I don't think I should be responsible to, because maybe I didn't understand the question about the responsibility. So actually everybody sees it in a different way and then they can interpret it a different way.
It's a more collective thing.
Yeah.
And the second question?
Yeah, the second question is for you. Because you mentioned about the projection. Like you said, it's a dangerous thing to project yourself when you write film critiques. And I'm wondering, do you think when you write film critique, because when you write something, it's hard to avoid to projecting ourselves in a film. Do you think you will try to avoid that happen, or you?
Well, it really depends what kind of projection is that. I mean, but at the same time, I would ask many questions to myself, and I think it's a process. I think it's dangerous in a way that, for instance, when you write during the festivals, you need to write fast, so there's maybe less of time, less space that you can actually ask yourself these questions. But once you start doing this, and once you start just dealing with the topic in a more in-depth way, I think like writing for me was very therapeutical, actually. And doing interviews in specific with filmmakers, because I actually started to pay attention more to what other people saying and not just focus on what's inside of me. And I think it's also deal with these projections, I think, because sometimes you can, for instance, when you project something on the film, and then if you confront it with filmmakers, you actually can get rid of these projections. And that's it's established through a dialogue. And I think it's in general, I would recommend everybody to make more interviews as a practice, because you can actually learn a lot about yourself in a very therapeutical way, but actually just learn to listen. And I think critics can actually be very full of themselves and very egocentric, and filmmakers as well, not to just say this is just critics. But what you said, I think, was when you said like you distinguish yourself from and independently from what you're doing, as like you don't define yourself through the work you do. I think it's a very healthy approach, but also it's a very healthy approach to stop projecting things as well. I mean, it's always nice to have those little things that you can, you know, just identify yourself within a certain reality, because that's the film that should be about. You can connect. But projecting, yes, it can be dangerous, and there are ways to deal with it. But actually, if you just, a sense is just to recognize those projections in the process, not necessarily write about them, but if you recognize them, then you can work around that, I think. Yeah, but thank you for the question. Another question from the audience? I think there was another hand risen there in the background. Yeah?
Hi. The late great Jean-Luc Godard once stated that if you want to critique a film, you have to make another film. And there have been several examples of that throughout film history. So I was wondering if there's ever been a film that angered you to such a degree that you thought of a film and in response to that film, or perhaps have or are there already parts of your work that can be interpreted as critiques of someone else's work?
No, for me, it was more. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, it was more maybe not one specific film or something like, but out of my own trajectory as a filmmaker when I did short films before, and then also like in connection with I think the production reality, which is also trying to formatize in a way like how films have to be produced and etc. Like, and how narrations has to be constructed, etc. Like there is like, I think there is a lot of space and a lot of freedom on one side, but I think it's a minority, and there is some kind of like truth how cinema should be, and I kind of like always thought like for me it was an aim to make a film which is free from these rules, and tries to aim for freedom itself, like being like with the surprising narration, or like surprise like myself and not condition myself making it, and I think this was a very strong longing I had before I did this film, and yeah, so in a way, maybe in an abstract way, yes, but not. It was not like I'm this film. I'm gonna answer to this film. It was more like maybe something more of what could be several films, or like like an idea of cinema, maybe.
But I guess it also comes with the fact that we are kind of, I guess, learned or taught to rely on canon, and then kind of just, either dialogue with it or just rely on that. And that leads me to, for instance, the Sight and Sound list that was just recently published, and how much the canon was kind of identified in a way, and how, for instance, the critics list diversified from the list of directors. But to just leave that as a kind of like final thought with how these dialogues exist within a media circulation as well. So these things are also a very, I think, valid reference point. I don't know if you check those lists from Sight and Sound, for instance, as a curiosity. You said you're a cinephile, but yeah, just to end up, because we're running out of time, I think. Thank you for all the questions, and Dana is gonna take the mic from me.
No, I'm gonna thank you and our guests, of course, but also I wanted to say that at 5:30 there is a drink in the Doele for accredited press and guests. So that's always a nice idea, that there's something waiting for you somewhere else. You have to walk for 15 minutes. But so before we work up a good thirst, Lukáš and Alonso and Madeline, thank you so much for being here, but especially Nafis, Valentin, and Remy, because you were kind of in the lion's den, and we learned so much from you today. So.